or sexual deviance or or something traumatic that happens in the family. It can be a divorce. It can be a whole lot of things. But every human being does have a seed uh, of negativity that's planted in their life at some point in time. But that doesn't say that that's the fruit is going to be a massacre. So in our communities, in our families, in our homes, healthy dialogue with our children and not taking for granted that just because we're providing, just because we have a nice home, a nice vehicle, that everything is just going peachy cream and wonderful with our child just because they're doing well in school. Healthy dialogue, and especially in our society where we see that technology has just taken the place of just face-to-face contact, face-to-face dialogue, just relational relationships that don't require a text, don't require an email. It's just, how are you doing? Talk to me. How was your day? Who made you angry on the playground? Mm-hmm. Tell me about it. Mm-hmm. Simple relational things like that go a long way in being able to identify those seeds when they're still seeds.
You know, I remember, as many of you all know, I used to be the host of my own talk show here at the university at WLJS called Late Night with Edmore III. It ended in November. But I do remember during early on in the show, during season 1, I remember we had a show about social networking. And I remember that one of the things that I mentioned on that show was that we need to speak more with our mouths and not our fingertips. Yeah. And I've always tried to make that a pivotal point, especially in the news and journalism business, one-on-one community. I mean, you know, I interact with other journalists and other broadcasters through social media and through Twitter, but there's nothing like actually sitting down with someone across a table and speaking about current events, current issues, and speaking like I'm sitting down and speaking to you all. You know, I mean, this is very personal. I'm sure we could do this via Skype. I'm sure I could just Skype all of you all in and we could just sit here and have a conversation about violence. But the fact that we are all here, we're connecting with each other. Julie Nix, I know you had your hand up, and I know you wanted to interject.
Well, I just want to, kind of expand on some things that, Aaron mentioned primary relationships. David mentioned, familial relationships. Pastor Smith has mentioned the power of personal relationships. I've worked with, kids, and now I'm working with young adults in the university setting. And the ones that I've been the most concerned about over time have been those kids and young adults that lack that connection to other people. And, when students come to college, it's a huge adjustment. And they may come here where they have, 50 people from their high school, or they may be introverted and be here alone. And, so when I see that, when they come into my office and I feel like they're, not really connected to other students, that's a red flag for me. And I work, and some of the other counselors that I work with, we all recognize that and try to get these students, connected to other people and organizations and things. I think that's really, really important to feel that sense of belonging in a community and that sense of connectedness to other people.
Mr. Walker? Mr. Walker?
I think everybody's hitting the nail on the head. One of the things that's going on is because I was reading the research about Adam Lanza, the guy
Yes.
who did the shooting, and one of the things
Sandy Hook.
he was very shy.
Mm-hmm.
It said he couldn't relate to people, and they said he couldn't give eye contact. And you see a lot of that going on now, like you said, everybody's talking with their fingers. A lot of people now, they don't even look up. I mean, just going across campus here, sometimes you see it. People don't even look up sometimes. I'm like, look up and say hi, But a lot of times, that not being able to relate. And when you look at the traits, you were talking about some of those traits a while ago with some of these perpetrators, they can't relate. And just like Pastor Smith said, we have to have healthy dialogue with children, teenagers, whoever, even if they don't want it, break into that space and let them know somebody loves you, somebody cares about you. What's going on with you? Can you talk to me?
Trace Fleming Smith?
I think, too, one of the important things with all of that with relations also is that the more connected we are, the greater empathy that we're able to have.
That's right.
And that's been something that I've been really thinking about with this in our conversation today, is that that empathy allows us to understand whether or not someone else is hurt or hurting, and so we can relate better to them. And it's all interconnected, and I think that that's a huge deal. But I think a lot of times when we're talking about empathy in general, you're absolutely right. We need to be talking with our kids about that, just as early as we possibly can, and be growing on that. There's a lot of best practices with violence prevention with the CDC, where that's one of the things is working with younger children and moving with curriculums that are evidence-based that can provide empathy and communication and respect. I think one of the things that we're really lacking is respect, and that needs to be encouraged just in general so we can continue on in our society in a healthier way.
Sean Creech, you've had to go visit homes of troubled families. How much of that close one-on-one interaction, how much of that really comes from the home? And because, a lot of people say, well, he was very loved at home, or he had two loving parents, middle class, the perfect, I guess you can call it suburban white picket fence life. But then, they go to school and they encounter hell. So, or it could be the different. They could go to school and have a wonderful social life and come home and encounter that hell. So how much of that social, or how much of that loving, tender care, how much of that must come from the home? Or is there a certain amount that should come from the home as opposed to other people giving it to you, like people your friends at school, perhaps?
Well, I mean, children aren't born knowing empathy or feeling certain feelings. A lot of it's learned behavior. A lot of it is taught and modeled to kids through their parents' interactions and how they watch their parents interact with each other, how their parents interacted with them. And so a lot of this, I think, is going to be built up off of the first 5 or 6 years of their lives before they even make it into the school setting. And once they're in the school setting, we're going to have to go back and interact with our kids when they come home from school. Ask them about what's going on. Engage with them in an attentive way and not just pacify them to get them out of your hair. I think that it's twofold.
Pastor Fred Smith?
And I think in our society, too, one of the things that's going to be really, really relevant and needed in the right now and in the years to come, for people that find themselves in leadership positions, whether it's leadership on the community level, whether it's leadership in the home level, whether it's leadership leading a Sunday school class, whether it's just personal leadership, I think people are going to have to take a greater responsibility for that leadership, knowing that ideally, that child should get that one-on-one contact from the home. But as we know, many children don't have that. But there is a leader somewhere that child is going to have face-to-face time with. And so for one child, that leadership may come through the Boys and Girls Club. For another child, that leadership may come on the softball field with a coach. For one person, that leadership may come when they go to church. But for each person, whatever their role of leadership or whatever our role of leadership is, when we see our leadership as something that, number one, is needed, number two, it has can have a positive effect on a person's life, their destiny, and their future, then we take a greater responsibility for that level of leadership. And so it won't be the mindset of, okay, you've come to this program, now I'm sending you home to your parents. The ultimate responsibility is with the parent, yes. But everybody, again, does not have that foundation at home. But if I take responsibility for my area leadership, you take responsibility for your area of leadership, and you say this: everybody that comes into my sphere, into my area of influence, they're going to leave better than when they came. Now, I don't know.
In your area,
in my
influence.
area, and everybody has a area of influence.
In other words, I can't control what happens once you leave my presence.
That's right.
But in other words, I'm going to control this bubble.
That's right.
And in this bubble, you're my responsibility.
There you go.
Okay.
And the things that I want to communicate and I want to leave with you will leave your life better. And so that's leadership. That's a question of leadership. You don't have to have a microphone in your hand to do that. You don't have to have a great stage, a grand stage to do that. As a matter of fact, some of the greatest leaders are those that are unseen and unknown, but they have imparted into some of the quote-unquote celebrity leaders that we see today. There was somebody behind the scenes. There was a teacher that took that face-to-face time. We don't know that teacher's name. We don't know that person's, but they did it. And so the great leaders of today, we know that they are the product of those type of relationships. So I would encourage people even that are listening, never see your level of leadership as insignificant. Never see your space of leadership as insignificant. Maximize your area of leadership, whatever you're called to do. If you're driving a school bus, let that school bus represent the type of environment that each kid that walks on is respected, that will feel good about themselves when they walk. If you're in the cafeteria and you're serving lunch in the lunch line and you see somebody picking on somebody else, you capture and dominate that area, and you let that area be your area of leadership. If you're sweeping the floors and you see a kid dropping chewing gum on the floor, dominate your area of leadership and say, hey, there's a consequence to you dropping that wrapper on the floor. So you see, from every level and every sphere, we do have the power to make a difference. And it doesn't necessarily start where we think it starts. I think it starts from each person saying, hey, my level of leadership does count.
Let me ask you, David E. Reddick. David, you're a politician. You're on the city council in a city here in Alabama, Anniston, Alabama. How much responsibility is placed on our politicians to be able to influence people in the right way to where these violent acts do not occur, to kind of diminish these acts of violence? How much real, true responsibility is placed in the lives of politicians to be able to do those things, to be able to have that bubble that Pastor Smith was talking about?
I don't know if it's as much the responsibility or the blame, that falls on the politician. But, I agree with what Pastor Smith said. As I look back at my life, whether it's the NAACP, city government, or whatever, the most impactful I can be, or the most influential I can be, is my ability to take people's needs or concerns and vocalize those concerns to the proper party to get the right results. And, every person is significant in that. As I look at my life, the most growth I had, I had a significant amount of growth at home, but the largest amount of growth was, I would say, my last couple of years in high school, when I started coming and hanging out with college students. Brother Smith was one of my mentors as I was a child, and he wasn't much older than me, but they taught me how to communicate, how to talk, how to do. So, being in passing in someone's life, you may actually be that influence that makes a difference in that person's life without even realizing. So we can't minimize as an individual the significance of what we do. When you see that person as a loner at school and everything, and you're the person that reach out to them and bring them into a group or a club and make them feel loved to some degree, you're influencing that person's life. So the more we come out of our comfort zone to really help and mentor people or be a part of their life or advocate for their needs. Sometimes we see someone going through something and trying to get something resolved, and we see that the only problem they're having is their miscommunicating what their need is. But we understand that sometimes to be able to step in there and be that advocate for them in that situation is all the change they need in their life to really put them on a pedestal to go the direction they're trying to go in their life. So as individuals, we are, significant.
One second. Dr. Tim Barnett, I want to give this question to you. You have a background in leadership and organizational behavior. How can you kind of piggyback off of what David E. Reddick and both Pastor Smith have said in regards to leaders and how they do really have a role in shaping the lives of people, and so they don't go out and commit these violent acts that we've been speaking about for the past hour? Is that leadership role, do they need to be held up to par?
Well, in response, I'm just thinking about what the other panelists have said here this evening, and I can't recall a panel or experience that I've had in recent years where I've heard so many worthwhile, just really right on target comments as I've heard here tonight. I'm just truly impressed with the way that people are handling this subject. And so, yes, I agree with the pastor here that there's a need for leadership. But, you know, in today's organizations, there's so much pressure on leaders to perform in terms of growing the business, you know, and